we need to think about ourselves spiritually. If those of us that have got the challenge of the role, what about my well-being spiritually? Where am I with God? And so I think I try and make sure that I'm doing some training that stretches me spiritually, theologically. I think it's so important, so that we don't rely on yesterday's blessing, so that we don't go back into our notes and sort of, I preached that sermon or whatever. Actually, what's the word for today? And also having time out. But I am doing a course with the Ignatian Spirituality Centre on prayer, and just encouraging, trying to work with young people in our church where we are, and try to serve in that. So solitude, service, and community are three words that I've been challenged to kind of like deepen my involvement with, so that I am in a healthy place, because only then can I begin to spill over.
Welcome to Sanctuary First's Emerging Emmaus podcast, and we've been going a wee while, and I can't believe we've not got to you, Peter, before now. Peter Wood, my good old mucker from Aberdeen uni days, my good mate from days up in the cold north.
Hey.
And in those years, subsequent years, you've had a bit of a journey. You've bounced down south and bounced back up again. Is that right, Peter?
Yeah, Neil Mail, Bobby Dazzler. Aye, we've been fairly far south in terms of, we went to Africa in the 1990s after I did my training for ministry, and then we were in Cambridgeshire for 18 years, came back to Edinburgh in 2018.
And you're at present, tell us your role.
I am the mission officer for Lothian and Borders Presbytery. I've done that for a couple of years now. It's the sort of thing I've been doing. I was director of mission for Ely Diocese, so looking strategically at how to support churches and thinking about that is something I've been on for a wee while.
Tell us a wee bit about your experience of church and what you've been finding out in your presbytery in regards to change and the transition of change and the changing of cultures. I mean, if it's anything like our presbytery, it can be quite frustrating. It can be exciting as well. There's a whole mix of experiences. What's your take at the moment, Peter?
I think we were fortunate to have someone that came in as our presbytery clerk who was keen to go back and ask first order questions, and said, what's the best way of looking at this? How can we provide a framework for a mission for our churches? How can we support our churches? I mean, this happened, as you know, Neil, off the back of presbytery planning. And so the first thing that we did was try and get around and support ministers and leaders, and build relationships, and just feel that through the bruising period of presbytery planning, people needed to be listened to be affirmed. And that meant, and we still do, we don't have an office in our presbytery. Our office is at home or in the car, really. So do lots of traveling to get to people and to be with them. So that was one of the things, these first order questions off the back of that, looking at how can we support churches from where they are, and listen to them and see what we can do. I mean, it's a challenge, as you highlighted there, with us getting older, with us with some numbers dwindling and having to close buildings. So it's a sobering backdrop. And yet, I think missionally, Neil, it's a really interesting one, because if you're asking first order questions, and it pushes you to desire to cherish the weakness of limited means, which throws you onto God and kind of looking to see what God's doing. So I'm saying to churches, maybe do less, not more, so that we can get to the discipleship conversations. But that's sometimes quite a journey, So yeah, there's things in our presbytery that are really encouraging at the moment. Had a morning with the quiet revival, and there's some churches which are finding it really tough, and I'm not sure where they'll be in 10 years' time, if I'm honest.
Mm. And you've got an interesting perspective with you having spent quite a while down south planting a church, Peter, and you come with that experience, of course, which is, I'm sure, very helpful. And you keep in touch with folk down south. I mean, one of the things I remember you saying recently was rather than pioneering, they talk about revitalization, or they've changed the language. Tell us a wee bit about the comparison and maybe the language we use. And you talked there about, basic uh, formative questions that we need to ask.
It's a challenge. I mean, every organization has got its pros and cons. And the thing is, Neil, we're part of a movement, and I think having worked abroad and worked for another denomination, another church, you get that sense that we are part of a bigger story. And that's one of the things that I feel myself saying many times to people. You are part of a bigger story. We're part of an international liberation movement, which crosses cultures, which spans the globe, which rejoices with people when the church is growing in China, when it's being faithful in parts of Africa, as well as what's happening in East Kilbride and in Duns, So that is a joy to have had that experience, and it makes me think there's always another way of seeing this. God has got plans beyond what we can currently see, and it's that discerning piece that we're called to do, in terms of prayer and mission. And so one of my roles as mission officer is to encourage clusters of churches to gather for prayer, to support one another, and to pray together, to build those relationships. And in that, to begin to see where God might be at work in ways beyond our programs and our traditional services. And if there's a project, we might share in together. But often we're still at the stage of rebuilding those relationships and supporting one another in prayer. You asked, I'm moving away from the question, you asked about the differences. I think in an Episcopalian system, there's more an obvious hierarchy. And so you've got a clarity of leadership at the cost of maybe less democratic. There's a smaller number of people who are making the decision for things. So in some ways, that church is flawed in terms of ideas of, in terms of equality. And yet it can move ahead and things can be introduced more quickly. And so the likes of the Fresh Expression movement, when the bishops got a hold of it, and became the amplifiers, then it gets traction. I'm struggling still. I feel, you and me, Neil, are kind of the amplifiers, people that can say, guys, what about this? I'm telling stories, but actually adding theological understanding and money and strategy to this means that you've got some amplification. But, yeah, it's a challenge. Language as well, pioneering, is something that in Scotland we've particularly struggled with. It sounds the tall poppy syndrome coming back, the whole kind of, who do you think you are? In terms of, is still something that I think assails us more in Scotland, because we're so committed to social justice, because we've got this flat structure. And so that word doesn't sit very easily. And yet the whole time, Hebrews would read that Jesus pioneered the faith. He was the first to, pioneer. And so starting new things, it's desperately needed alongside the revitalization. You mentioned the Church of England, and my friends there are saying that the Church of England has begun to put more of an emphasis on that and maybe less on the Fresh Expression movement, feeling that they want numbers to grow quicker and work from where they are. I don't understand the full story, having moved away now for a number of years, but I think I can understand that. But alongside that, every organization needs to have an edge that's doing new stuff that we can learn from and with. I just wish there's more of that, Neil.
It's heartening to hear you share Peter, and you talk about amplifiers, you talk about key people in situations to provide leadership and encouragement, and clearly in your Presbytery clerk, who's now becoming our CEO.
You too.
You've had Norman, someone who's really been able to help get you started on the right sort of trajectory.
Yes, yes. Yeah, very much. I mean, I think we've been looking at developing a culture and how can we build a culture that affirms people to embrace mission and to think about going beyond the walls of the church, thinking about discipleship, thinking about prioritizing younger people, encouraging lay leadership. These are all things we need to just bring on and get into the life stream on lifeblood of the church, you know?
Yes, and you mentioned prayer as first and foremost the vital breath of our lives and our any movement, the
Absolutely. And
dependency
as a
on
mission
God.
officer, that's why I've picked that up,
Yeah.
because I think the two are so closely aligned. We pray to align our lives or our values with that of God. Jesus said, "My will is not to run around and do 100 things, but to do the will of the Father." That's all I'm here to do. And so that discerning piece is just so important. And that's where I think one of the things my role is to sit with people and to pray and to listen to the context, listen to the gifts that people have got, listen to the opportunities, and see if there's a next step that can be taken.
And the changing of cultures varies from church to church, congregation to congregation, areas to areas, and presbyteries to presbyteries. I'm sure one of the frustrations I've recognised in six presbyteries coming together to become one presbytery is while in Irvine and Kilmarnock we were developing Fresh Expressions Pioneer Mission. That wasn't the experience of our neighbouring presbyteries, whom we're getting to know and to love and to learn from. But there's a lot of the culture that harks back to the way it's always been done,
Right.
and in some ways wants to echo what's always been done. And I think back to our presbytery, Irvine and Kilmarnock, it took us 10 years probably in changing the way we did things and changing the way we did presbytery meetings to focus more on mission, to get to the stage where we felt able or we were motivated and determined to, well, we've got to do something new. And so the pioneer mission projects, initiatives have been going on, and we've been learning a lot from them. Uh, what about your own cultures? What about because you've how many presbyteries came together and how's
Or,
that go? Four presbyteries came together. Yep.
I mean, in that, Neil, I think what's important is communications. I mean, it's vital. Regular communications, visits, emails, every form, and to affirm people and to give them a sense of belonging, that you're part of something bigger. That again, that sense of movement, and to feel a joy in that, and that takes away a loneliness. So we have a regular email that goes out to over 400 people once a week. Norman and I sent out with stories, with resources, with updates, with what's happening. Um, then we've got cluster gatherings that, again, as the mission officer, as I said, breaking down our presbytery into smaller areas to get people to pray and to meet with each other. Something I do. And then groupings. I mean, I organize a network for youth leaders and a occasional messy church leaders. Again, just looking across our presbytery, how can we support those within the presbytery? We've got grant funds, that little few £100s to give to projects. And so that people feel that presbytery is not on their case, but is on their side. So it's still a journey in progress, and we still need to earn that right. But it's been a privilege as well as hard work. Lots of traveling in the car and meeting with people still, unearthing and encouraging new leadership. But I think all of that, Neil, is part of growing a new culture.
Communication, communication, communication.
Indeed.
Not least with God and
Yeah.
prayer. Yes, yes. And you're involved in in helping train and teach and spread the learning, amplify the learning in a course. Is that right?
Yeah, when we can, at New College, do an Introduction to Pioneer and Church Planting course, which gives people a roadmap. And it's been valued by people who've done it. This is about the fourth or fifth time we've been doing it. So it looks theologically at the underpinnings of mission and God at work that we speak about. What is that, and how does that fit, and what's my responsibility? And so just sitting with people to help them to encourage to read and to talk about these questions. And then the joy is that we've got a range of great speakers that come in and share their experiences. Steve Aisthorpe, Alan William, yourself, from different parts of Scotland, and looked at their stories and their values. And people doing new things, whether it be in the Mearns or learning communities, just seeing what is possible. So yeah, this is a hybrid course. We start online. We start in person, because you need to meet people and build relationships on a Saturday, and we finish in Edinburgh on that way. But the rest is online, and yeah, we've had a lot of good feedback from this. It's an introductory thing. But as I say, it's a roadmap that provides people an opportunity to see what is possible and to hear some stories of what's happening across Scotland.
And when does that start? When does it finish? How do you plug
January,
into that?
and it runs for 8 weeks. If you go on Edinburgh University short courses for church people, it's £210, but the fees can be paid for by Seeds for Growth, level 1. I think you as a church have to pay for that, and then you recoup the money. But I'd encourage you to go on that as a cohort. Always better to go than just yourself. Take your session clerk or another member of your leadership team. So 2 or 3 of you, and we've had a few churches do that and found that really helpful as they go. And when we break out sessions, they then chat together about where they're at on these things. So yeah, that's where that's to be found.
Marvelous. So when does it start? Did you say again?
End of January. We're taking applications until 15th of January. I think is the final date for that.
Yeah. And I'm intrigued, Peter, to learn from you and hear a bit about your experience of planting a church, because what was it, 13 years you were involved there, and the time it takes to plant a church, and the roller coaster ride I imagine it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, it's amazing, hard not to look back now and think just how wonderful it was, and to forget all those early days where it was just me and we're meeting in a ropey porta cabin, and you think, is this going anywhere, God? And a long way from Scotland, a long way from Stonehaven. Yeah, but excited by the breadth. I mean, I was doing this with a bunch of different churches. So I was an ecumenical minister appointed to plant a new church in an area of new housing. But it opened up me to see that people in those contexts had particular needs and opportunities, and were looking again at themselves for their values. A number of people in that situation who looked at just what they wanted out of life, and a couple of times I baptized a mother alongside the baby because we got chatting about what she wanted. And I said, what about you? Have you been baptized? Oh, no, I haven't. Well, actually, why don't we do that? And so we went from meeting in first of all, the waiting room of a doctor's surgery, which was a space the community used. Peter Bailey was a fantastic doctor. Him and I did a few projects together. And then we moved to a porta cabin that we brought in. It was called the Ark because it arrived floating in a sea of mud. And that was the first community space that we provided for the development. There was 50 houses when I moved in. When I left, there's 10,000 people. But we went from the porta cabin to then the community centre that was by then built by the developers, to finally having enough money to put up a church centre ourselves. But the joy of that was also having the youth work and to see a church school open, and just people to come through faith, through Alpha, and through service and conversation. Very privileged situation, and forming a team. I mean, the team of people I worked with, who a brethren guy who had been a builder, a midwife who was Anglican, South African Baptist. You know, the mixture of people that God brought together was just fabulous. And prayer times on a Tuesday were just wonderful. Well, they were a highlight of my week where I really learned what was going on. And we swapped stories and we prayed together. And just the fundamentals of having a team to do these things so important. So it's a great time, Neil, and lots of lessons in terms of the particularity of a new housing context and the opportunity, the belief that people are asking in there, first order questions. We spoke about that earlier. You know, people who moved, I do believe people, even though they still come from locally, some people say to me, but they've just moved along the road for a more cozy house or something. But you're looking at life from a different perspective. You might change catchment schools. You might shop somewhere differently. It just nudges you to a different place to maybe think about your lifestyle differently. And so in the midst of all of that, what are you looking for? What's the center of your life? What's the organizing principle? Where's the gospel fit? What's the gospel sound like in that situation? And so the uniqueness of that context was something that fascinates me still, because we've got new housing areas here. But it was a privilege to see people come to faith and grow a church, a multi-denominational church that was multicultural, as I say, and with several services by the time I left, and it was great fun, just wonderful. But as I say, so easy, Neil, to look back with rose-tinted spectacles and look at it from the last year I left as opposed to the first year where I started, and just was kind of just believing that God had taken us there. I kept saying to myself, look, God, if we could work in Congo, surely we can work in Cambridgeshire as well. You know, besides, they both begin with C, you know, so.
Oh, that's great. And do you find, I mean, one of the key things there you mentioned, as well as prayer, is the listening, the intent listening to God and to people. What are the things that are making folk tick, and what are they yearning for, and connecting with the gospel? In Scotland, do you see it's you know, I sense sometimes that it takes, you know, it takes about 10 years for the things that are maybe happening down south in terms of softening of culture and an approach to life and asking the questions. It maybe takes about 10 years sometimes for the changes that we're seeing down south to be experienced up here. I think we're a wee bit more thrown up here as well. I think we're a wee bit more dug in, traditional. Is that the case? Of course, the Holy Spirit can break through whatever. But in terms of culture, is it harder up here than down south?
There are less streams feeding into the society, you know, less streams in terms of history of spirituality, and less, we're smaller populations, so it does feel a little bit lonelier in some ways. And so I do think we are quite canny as Scots. We are that. But there are times, Neil, I think, you know, at the moment, you know, just at this very time, there are encouragements. And I do think when you get some momentum, like you had in Irvine and Kilmarnock, when you get some momentum and you see God doing things and people coming to faith and stories like that, that can build, and people take heart from that and do think that things can change. I mean, again, a number of young men pitching up at churches in East Lothian, across the borders, saying, I've read the Bible, or I've done half the Alpha course, maybe I should become a member of your church. What do you think? You know, and the ministry goes, whoa, sorry, who are you? Where'd you come from? You know, it's remarkable. It's remarkable. This is happening, you know. Just someone telling me in East Lothian, you know, there's 6 professions of faith. They haven't had that since 1938, you know, and suddenly 6 professions of faith, you know. In Dunbar, 6 people, you know, 6 conversions. Yeah, just remarkable what is happening in small ways. I just pray that we are open enough as church to allow ourselves to journey with these people and don't expect them to find our ways, that we're humble enough. Don't rush maybe to a course even, Neil. I would say people are looking for such a relational Christianity, I've been saying to leaders, you meet with them. Don't rush to do a discipleship course off the peg. You meet with them and go through John's Gospel and chat with them and pray with them. Now that's costly, but isn't that biblical? Isn't that, surely, thank God, we've gone past the stage of numbers of people and bombs on pews. We've got to be into conversations and ones and twos and just enjoy that and to revel in what God is doing because it's surprising.
Yes, that's heartening and encouraging, and of course the quiet revival is quiet revival that they're showing and sharing from down south in England and Wales, but there definitely are signs around and a shift in culture, particularly among younger people and among blokes, as you've said as well. We've seen evidence of that and people coming to faith, people coming into church just the other day. Yeah, there was a bloke hadn't seen since his I buried his grandpa about 20 years ago, and he recognized me, and I
Yeah.
said, "Remind me who you are." And he's in the army, and he says he's found religion. That's how he described it. And on Christmas Day, we're having baptisms.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's a family that have found renewed faith or come to faith, and a granny and her son and daughter-in-law and their three girls, twins and who are 9 and an older sister who's 12. They all want to be baptized. So we're not going to do it in the River Irvine as sometimes we do it, but we'll do it indoors this time on Christmas Day, which will be lovely. And it's the follow through, of course, that is so important, isn't it? As you say, the one-on-one, the journeying alongside people, getting them into that process of personal discipleship and following Jesus. But it's the follow through as well, isn't it? Because very easily it is about the parable of the seed and the sower, and people can be very enthusiastic, but not have the heart that allows the gospel to go deep and down. And so you're telling us, Peter, that there's evidence of God at work, and how are you sharing that with congregations and ministers and workers who are not seeing that? Because there's the danger, I think, of people thinking, well, that's you, it's not happening here.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, because I'm an ordained minister, I can say to people where they're looking for someone to do communion or the locums on holiday or whatever, I can take your services. And so it means as a mission officer, I can get to see the inside of the church in some ways, if you like, And when I do that, every time I do that, Neil, I say to folks, right, I've got a deal with you. I'm going to tell you a few stories, but you need to tell me some back first of all. So tell me what's been going on here, and I've got some cracking stories I'm going to share with you. And folks regularly go to me, oh, nothing much has been happening here, nothing much. I say, okay, in that case, just begin to tell me what you've been doing in the last 6 months. I'll write some of this down, and they can start and they get going. Oh, and they get going, it picks up. So I start writing a few things, and then it come to an end and I can hold up the piece of paper and go, and you said nothing's happening, but let me tell you the stories of what's happening elsewhere in our presbytery. Just because there are stories of encouragement, a church that's got 8 new members, which is a small church where it's lay-led, and they're finding a renewed confidence in their faith. Not unlike yourself, or a church where they have moved out of their church building, they've grieved it, they've struggled, and they're now in the village hall. Is that a sign of weakness? It's a sign of opportunity. They're finding people are seeing them, whereas the place the church building wasn't visible in the same way. And people are now finding their way to church on a Sunday and finding their way to faith in a way that they weren't, So yeah, I take every opportunity to do that and then tell stories through on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. Again, as a mission officer, we don't have a comms officer. I run that, I organize that. So telling of these stories regularly. I've got a whole lot of videos, Neil, to edit to do with prayer and stuff next week because it's finally getting quiet. Folks I finally get a chance to kind of just get on with these and edit them and stuff. But making those stories and just recording them. We get our youth, we've had a competition to say, tell us what Christmas is like. And so we've just had them on our YouTube channel and trying to point people to the YouTube channel and say, that's the culture people are in, storytelling that's visual, use it at your cafe church on a Sunday. So yeah, storytelling again as a mission officer is a huge part of what I do, and want to encourage others in doing. So stories of transition, Neil, not stories
Hmm.
that are just wonderful. I mean, there's a time when I kind of felt when I first arrived, the culture was I can only tell my story if I've published a book about it.
Right.
If I've got a PhD from the university and I've got my book out, then I'll tell you my story because it's complete. But do we have the audacity to tell a half-baked story, or actually to sort of say, this has begun well? Well, celebrate that. Give thanks to God for the step you've made, because that's faith. Who knows the next step, you know? So just, but again, I think as Scots, we are, again, canny and say, oh, I'm not worthy, not much is happening, And yet, when we count our blessings, if we start with gratitude, such a good way into prayer, just looking at gratitude, the giftedness of life, all that we're given, then we see there's things going on more than we realize, because that's faith and that's God more than we're not about being event managers. And I get worried for my colleagues if it seems like we've got so much going on that we've ended up being somehow being event managers. I don't
Mm.
see Jesus in the gospel being an event manager. He had profound conversations with ones and twos.
Mm. And there was an elderly lady, Nana Craig, who I said to her, Nana, you're a glass half full person, aren't you? She was just lovely and so positive. She had a lot she could have complained about. And she said, no, Neil, I'm a full and running over person.
Mm.
And she really shone brightly and beautifully despite her difficulties, which was lovely. Yes, the attitude of gratitude, not gratitude, is so important, and and also really important. And you mentioned it, what you experienced down south in your church plant, that meeting to pray that really energized you. Um, you're it's coming from you. It's you're breathing it. I can tell. It's been caught. And it's better caught than taught. And so what? Tell us a wee bit about what it means for you to be energized and encouraged, and because clearly you're it sounds like you're protecting that kind of these disciplines or spaces. How are you encouraged and enabled?
That's a good and important question, Neil, because we need to think about ourselves spiritually. If those of us that have got the challenge of the role, what about my well-being spiritually? Where am I with God? And so I think I try and make sure that I'm doing some training that stretches me, spiritually, theologically. I think it's so important so that we don't rely on yesterday's blessing, so that we don't go back into our notes and sort of I preached that sermon or whatever. Actually, what's the word for today? And also having time out. I mean, having time out, just as you do. I love. I'm just was in contact with Steve Esther this today about going to Kilmalue again.
Mm.
Um, but I am doing a course on with the Ignatian Spirituality Centre on prayer, um, and just encouraging, trying to work with young people in our church where we are, and try to serve in that. So solitude, service, and community are three words that I've been challenged to kind of like deepen my involvement with, um, so that I am in a healthy place, because only then can I begin to spill over, as you're saying. There's something positive as opposed to it being a should or a duty or something joyous and liberating, if it comes from a personal experience that is full and is alive.
Yeah, I've just signed up for more study leave, and it astonishes me and upsets me as well that more ministers don't use the study leave opportunity. And I think it's partly because we think we're indispensable and we think the parish can't do without us. And I know it's so important that we get these times out. Like Kilmaloo, what a place to go to up in the northwest. Beautiful, fantastic. And so I'm going down to Oxford and uh, going to ask some questions down there about how they're connecting with younger people. And
Great.
yeah, so I'm looking forward to that.
You
Um,
got you got Youthscape as well, Neil?
no, but you can tell me about it.
Oh, fantastic bunch at Youthscape, which is a bit further south than Oxford. Sorry, I don't
Yeah,
know, but I'll tell you after this call. I'll kind of like send
yeah,
you those details because again, such a formative. They were the people when I was in Cambridgeshire. I would look to them for the latest thinking on things and with young people.
yes. Because what I'm recognizing here is that you know we are seeing a hunger, a thirst, a yearning for more among our younger people in our town and towns. And I know it's a different setup and scenario down south in Oxford, but there are principles and things that we can learn and be encouraged by, I'm sure.
One of the things on that, Neil, is that Growing Young has been a significant vehicle for culture change in our presbytery. We've had
Yes.
nearly 25% of our churches have done the Growing Young program, which is Fuller based. Graham Duffin has led on, and I've seconded him on that. So a whole lot of churches are looking to prioritize young people, uh, thinking about key chain leadership. Um, and we've got churches I'm coach at the moment for some of our churches as they look at kind of how do they do this from where they are. And some of the churches on this cohort are back at basics saying, how do we get in touch with young people? But bless them, they want to ask those questions and they want to know that and to try and readdress these things, you know. So, yeah, Growing Young has been an important learning community. And again, a learning community. And I think Growing Young has provided a sense for people to get together and become a team. I know that Douglas Hamilton would say that, you know, time with those folks chatting about the values of Growing Young helped show people it wasn't just the minister who had ideas. You know, actually, this was a team thing, and so that momentum came from those discussions, and you know, so yeah.
Excellent. Yes, Growing Young. And we have a podcast, if you delve back, folks, with Graham Duffin and Growing Young and how it can be such a helpful course to go on. And as you say, learning communities, getting folk together to go and look and listen and learn and pray and see what can happen locally.
The other thing is I'm keen on is outdoor pilgrimage, and so I organise a Presbytery pilgrimage once a year. We did the Borders Abbey Way, which is absolutely beautiful over a week, and invite people to bring a friend and to come and to kind of take a walk for 12, 15 miles. And in the midst of that, we stop occasionally to pray, to notice things, to talk about history, the abbeys. You know, this year we're doing from Forth to Farn, which is from North Berwick to Lindisfarne. And again, we're taking a week before Holy Week, and inviting people on that. And that was great fun. And again, the conversations we had on that, Neil, were wonderful, wonderfully deep. You're walking alongside people, and there's somebody last year who now is exploring ministry, and people get to know each other. Again, a good way for a presbytery to kind of like see its churches. We walk, you know, we pray in our local churches because you know, Borders Abbey Way touched a whole lot of places, Melrose, Gala, Jedburgh, Selkirk. And this year again, you know, walking from North Berwick through Eyemouth, you know, kind of Coldingham, Priory,
Mhm.
you know, all the way down to Berwick upon Tweed and Lindisfarne. So again, praying in these churches with these folks and connecting them up again, and each day putting something on the Facebook page, and you know, kind of, it's a great little project. So I look forward to that. One of the joys, I mean, Norman was happy that I take a week to do that, and within that missionally, I say to people, what about inviting your husband if they don't come to church? If they're a bit bored, think church is just a waste of time. What about walking outdoors? Bet they do some of that. You know, come with us and see how they find that. You know, just have they done long distance walks before? You know, so yeah, so that's something we now do once a year in our presbytery. It's great fun.
Marvelous, marvelous. And pilgrimage is becoming very popular, this sense of journeying and walking together.
It is. When I
And it's,
first did it in St Cuthbert's a few years ago, you meet up with people and caught up with these ladies about the same age as me and kind of like splashing through the mud. It was so wet that year. And I caught, oh, hi, whatever, you're walking at the same pace. And I would say who I am and what I do. And what you do, as you know, Neil, sometimes there's a bit of a silence, a bit of a lull in the conversation. Oh, right. Oh, where do we go from here? And they all said, oh, I'm not religious. And yet, as we walked on, when I kind of like walked with some of them, they all began to say, oh, my son goes to church in Edinburgh, or I pop into the Episcopal Church for the carols, or they all still had some connection to a local church, or their family had, or they whispered something to me, kind of like, just tell me more about this or something, And I just such a good little conversation that would never have happened, but the fact we're walking alongside, splashing through the mud together up these hills by Moorbattle,
Ah, bless you, brother. It's been fantastic hearing your stories and God's blessing into and through you as you journey on across there on the other side of the country.
Well, it's a privilege doing what I do, Neil. I mean, we're so grateful to have this, and God's given me such a joy in terms of working in Congo and in Cambridgeshire, and here we are, in Lothian borders, and yeah, just giving thanks to God for each day, really,
Marvelous. And you've encouraged us. You've pointed us to Jesus, the pioneer and founder of the church and the sustainer of the church and the universe. And you've given us lots to think about and encouraged us. And your humble heart and servant-heartedness shines through, which is just lovely, Peter. Thanks so much for sharing with us.
Well, thanks, Neil, and thanks for flagging out the Pioneer course as well, which is just one of, you can do other courses, but people have found it a roadmap, is what folks have said. So great speakers, and some readings, and good little cohort of people. So think about that, so.
Absolutely, yes. We'll try and put a link to that in our
Cool.
little stuff down below. So, go well, friends. Thanks for tuning in to Sanctuary First's Emerging Emmaus, and subscribe and maybe go delve back to see further other podcasts that can encourage you and inspire you. Go well, friends.
In your neighbourhood trudged two dumped Jesus friends, drowning before dawning, moving through a maze of misery to an amazing Emmaus encounter. Emerging Emmaus.
Good grief, our dream is dead. Going home instead, comfort of my bed.
Good grief, the pain. Hope hard to sustain, love down the drain.
Good grief, where have you been? What we've seen, blown to smithereens.
Good grief, how our hearts burned, our minds turned, all we learned.
Good grief, don't go away, come in to stay. You've shown the way.
Good grief, how he broke the bread with hands that bled, then disappeared.
Good grief, Jesus alive? No need to strive, chance to thrive. Jesus alive.
Good grief, no time to waste. Now we have a taste, to Jerusalem with haste.
Emerging Emmaus. A well-kent lament echoes through the years. How long? How long? Good as is the grieving process, may it be a means to access visions and dreams of Christ's kingdom come. Emmaus, emerge from the gloom. Come, Holy Spirit, come.
So for future podcasts, join us via the Sanctuary First website, Facebook page and app, and also via Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Come on, tune in.